The proposal that shook two worlds in the heart of the galactic peace hall stood a long silver table stretching between two opposing worlds. On one side sat the leaders of Earth, dressed in sharp uniforms of dark blue with golden lines on their shoulders. On the other side, tall figures with pale skin and armor-like robes watched in silence. They were from the Empire of Villari, known across the galaxy for their strength, their strict codes, and their dislike for change. Among them sat Princess Lyra, the daughter of the High Empress. Her posture was like a blade, straight and proud. Her long silver hair fell across her armored shoulder, untouched by softness. She did not blink much. Her eyes held cold fire. Her people respected her for that. She never laughed in public. She never lowered her head. Across from her sat a man named Tom, a human, not tall like the Villari, not dressed in heavy armor. His face was open, his eyes calm. He had nothing sharp about him. He smiled too much. He spoke in a way that did not feel heavy like most politicians. When others used large words to sound important, he used small ones that made people listen. Room had been silent for minutes. Talks had reached a wall. Neither side wanted to give more than they could take. The air was thick with mistrust. Some Villari guards reached for their weapons at one point. Some human soldiers stood up. Then, Tom stood without raising his voice. His movement quieted the room. He did not ask for more trade. He did not speak of laws or ships. He did not suggest a treaty with 50 pages. Instead, he looked across the table and said something no one expected. He said he would marry the princess, not as a joke, not as a trick. He spoke like someone asking the sun to rise. Gasps filled the room. Some human delegates stared at Tom as if he had lost his mind. Villari soldiers tensed. The Empress turned her head slowly toward her daughter. Lyra did not move for 5 long heartbeats, then she stood. Her voice came like ice through the hall. She asked him if he was serious. Tom nodded. She asked him again. He nodded again. She looked him in the eye, like she was searching for the lie in his soul. She found nothing but truth and calmness. No fear, no pride, no demand, just belief. It made no sense to her. Humans were strange. Their ways were weak. They used feelings more than logic. But here was one willing to bind himself to a Villari. Royal, to her. Not for power, not for gain, but for peace. Behind her, some whispered that this was a trick, a human trap. Others said it was madness. But Lyra could not take her eyes off the man across from her. His words had torn open the shape of the meeting. Nothing written in law had prepared her for this. She asked him why. He answered with no delay. He said that true peace would not come from papers or weapons or rules. It would come when one world gave its heart to another. When two different people walked forward without shields between them. He said he believed in this union. He believed it could change everything. His voice did not shake. His hands stayed steady. She wondered if he knew what he was doing. A royal bond was sacred. It was not a symbol. It was a merging of histories. A marriage with her would mean becoming one of her people. Living by their codes, sharing in their burdens. She could see no fear in him. She stepped forward without thinking. The guards flinched but did not act. She stood close enough to see the tiny lines beside his eyes. She could feel his breath. Still no fear. Still no lie. In that moment, Lyra remembered a battlefield long ago. Smoke, screams, fire raining from the sky. She had been trapped under metal wreckage. Her squad was gone. Blood covered her side. A human soldier had come running through the fire. She had pointed her weapon at him. He dropped his rifle and pulled her free with his bare hands. He carried her to safety and vanished into smoke before she could ask his name. She looked at Tom now and realized it had been him. Her lips parted but no words came. The memory hit like lightning. She stepped back slowly. Her mind screamed for logic. Her blood whispered something else. The Empress raised her hand and told the council to pause the meeting. She said the matter would be reviewed in private chambers. She said her daughter would decide. The hall began to clear. News would spread across the stars within hours. Some laughed. Some shouted. Others watched in silence. Tom stood alone now. The human side looked at him with a mix of confusion and awe. Some whispered that he had thrown away his career. Others whispered that he might have started something much bigger than himself. Outside the hall, Lyra stood at the edge of a long balcony looking at the stars. Her hand touched the metal rail. Her eyes followed the pattern of distant lights. She had lived her life for duty, for rules, for power. Yet now she faced a choice no one expected. No rulebook held the answer. She asked herself if she could accept what this human had offered. A bond not just of politics, but of souls. A joining not forced by law, but by belief. Behind her, footsteps came soft across the floor. Tom stood there. Again, not pushing, not asking. Just waiting. She turned to him with a strange feeling growing in her chest. Not fear, not anger. She asked him one more time if he was serious. He looked at her and gave the same answer. She did not speak after that. But she did not walk away either. The princess's dilemma. Lyra sat in her chamber built of crystal walls and silver beams. The floor under her feet shimmered with quiet light. Her cloak lay forgotten on the chair behind her. Her fingers tapped the edge of the table as her mind walked in circles. She had stood before wars and led fleets through burning skies. She had faced assassins and rebels without flinching. But now she faced a question with no blade, no shield, no armor that could protect her. Could she marry a human? She had not yet said yes or no, but the world already buzzed with voices. Across the empire, messengers moved fast. Screens lit up across cities. Banners changed color to mark the breaking of old paths. Even children whispered the human's name as if it were part of a story that had jumped out of myth into truth. Tom. The man who spoke gently in the storm. The man who smiled without fear. The man who asked for her hand like he asked the wind to blow warm. She remembered his face. Calm as always. Clear eyes that did not try to hide behind power. He had stood in a room full of warriors and leaders and offered himself not with force but with belief. His voice still echoed inside her mind like a bell that refused to stop ringing. Her advisors begged her to reject the proposal. They called it foolish. They said humans were soft creatures driven by emotion. They warned her that Tom could never understand the weight of royal duty or the deep roots of Villari law. They feared his presence would break the chain of command that held their empire strong. But Lyra had begun to wonder if the chain itself had grown too heavy. She had lived her whole life inside stone rules. Every step, every breath, every word shaped by tradition. Even her armor was forged not just for battle, but for image. She was not allowed to be unsure, to hesitate, to feel. Yet this human had walked into her world and shown a new shape of strength. He had not bowed yet had not challenged. He had not begged yet had not demanded. He had stood like a tree in the wind. She turned on her table screen and brought up a file. A record of Tom's past. Not the official summary her advisors gave her. A real record. She found stories told by soldiers who had served with him. She read about how he had once pulled a wounded enemy soldier from a collapsing cave, even when that soldier had tried to kill him earlier. She found footage of him staying behind to repair a broken refugee ship while his own team evacuated. There were no medals in those moments, no speeches. Just actions. He had been mocked by his own commanders more than once. He had been called foolish, naive, reckless. Yet those who followed him never left his side. and none ever spoke a word of betrayal. Lyra felt something shift inside her as she read. Not trust, not yet, but something close. Something warmer than logic and stronger than law. Her door opened without sound. A servant entered and placed a silver disc on her table. A gift from Earth. Inside it held a message. She waved her hand, and the disc glowed. A soft image appeared above it. A recording from Tom. He stood in what looked like a garden on a human space station. No armor, no uniform. Just him. He spoke simply. He said he knew the road ahead was not easy. He said he understood what she would have to give up. He said he did not want her crown or her power or her throne. He only wanted to stand beside her, not above, not below. He said unity between worlds could not begin with weapons or commands. It had to begin with choice. He ended the message by saying he would wait for her answer, even if it took a lifetime. The disc dimmed. The image vanished. The silence felt different now. Lyra stood and walked toward the wide window that faced the stars. The sky beyond shimmered with moving lights from distant systems. A few of her people had begun to gather in the gardens below. Some held banners. Some held candles. A peaceful call. A message of hope. Not all voices resisted change. Some dared to believe in it. A sudden memory struck her again. That day on the battlefield long ago. The moment she had been trapped. The smoke, the noise, the sharp pain in her ribs. She had been ready to die. Then arms had lifted her from the wreckage. Strong arms not covered in metal but in fire-scorched cloth. She remembered the way his voice had calmed her in the middle of chaos. She had never seen that face again until now. It had been him. Always him. She clenched her fist and turned away from the window. If she accepted this path, it would not be a soft journey. The Empire would resist. The Council would fight. Enemies would rise. But something inside her no longer wished to remain untouched. Behind walls. She had walked the path of duty for too long. Now she wanted to walk a path with meaning. She needed answers, but none would come from advisors or books. She would speak to him. In person, without guards, without audience. One meeting. One truth. Later that night under a small shield dome in the garden of the Peace Hall, Tom waited alone. He looked up at the stars. No guards, no weapons. Just silence. Then she arrived. She stepped through the arch with her cloak trailing behind her. Her face unreadable. Her voice calm. She asked him again why he had done this. He gave the same answer. She looked into his eyes for a long time. She sat beside him on the stone bench. The night held its breath. The princess did not smile, but she did not leave shadows behind. The throne, the Empire of Valeri, looked strong from the outside. Its ships floated like blades across the stars. Its laws stretched over hundreds of planets. Its leaders stood tall with voices of iron. But behind the thick walls and golden halls, something darker moved in silence. A shadow made of fear and pride. In a hidden chamber below the royal palace, a group of figures gathered. Faces covered, voices low. These were not rebels. These were high-ranking members of the old council, generals, lords, silent rulers of tradition. They called themselves the Keepers. Their goal was simple: protect the Empire from change. No matter the cost. The news of the humans' proposal had shaken them like a sudden quake. A union between a Valeri royal and a human diplomat was more than strange. It was dangerous. It would open doors that had remained closed for centuries. The Keepers believed it would bring ruin. They called it poison in a golden cup, so they made a plan. Quiet, precise. Remove the human. Do it cleanly. Leave no trail. Make it look like an accident, a crash, a failure of gravity stabilizers, a piece of metal falling at the wrong time. One moment of silence. One end above them, in the palace garden, the world felt peaceful. The princess and the human had begun to meet more often. Not in crowds, not with speeches, but in quiet corners where the stars could be seen and guards stayed far. Their talks had grown longer. Their silences more comfortable. Tom never tried to impress her. He did not bring gifts or use titles. He listened when she spoke. He asked questions no one dared ask before. He asked what made her laugh, what made her angry, what she feared as a child. She told him things she had never spoken aloud. In return, he shared stories of Earth, of oceans that breathed like living creatures, of forests that sang with wind, of fire that danced without command. She listened without blinking. Each word built a bridge between their worlds. A quiet bridge made of shared truth. But not everyone watched with hope. A warning reached Lyra one evening from a loyal guard. A whisper that a strike had been planned. A human was the target, one name, one life. She knew at once who it was. She did not wait. She moved through the halls like a flame. She found Tom just before he boarded the diplomatic shuttle heading back to Earth's camp. She pulled him aside with a grip that made him pause. Her voice calm but cold, she told him to stay in the city that night. Not on the shuttle, not in open air. She said she could not explain yet. Only that danger had turned its eyes on him. Tom did not argue. He had seen death before. He trusted her the way one tree trusts the wind to carry its seeds far. They hid inside an empty tower near the river dome. Only one guard stood at the entrance. Lyra paced while Tom sat near the window. She blamed herself for his risk. He shook his head and said every choice worth making carried weight. He said he had not come this far to be safe. He had come to change. Something real outside. The wind pressed hard against the glass. A sound like deep drums echoed from the skies. Storms were rising. Not just in weather but in hearts. Elsewhere in the city, the keepers waited for the shuttle to fall. They waited for the report, but it never came. Their target had not flown. Their plan had missed. They would not wait again that night. Lyra and Tom spoke for hours. She told him stories of ancient Valari battles, of leaders who gave everything for unity, of her mother who had built peace with her voice instead of her sword. Tom listened, then told her about his sister who raised him, about growing up near the factories, about how hard life could be and how light still found ways to shine. Their hands touched once as she passed him a cup of heated roots. Neither pulled away in that moment. Something old cracked inside her, not in pain but in release. A door opened. Not wide, not fast, but enough. The next day, they walked back into the palace together. The city watched. The people whispered, began to spread like sparks on dry leaves, but far away a meeting was held again. The keepers had failed once. They would not fail twice. Now they would move with full force. Not in shadows, not in secret, but with fire. They would strike before the union became law. They would end it before vows could be spoken, before hearts could change the course of stars. The trial before the throne. A wide hall stretched beneath the palace dome, where silver beams curved like wings reaching for the sky. Light filtered through layers of crystal that changed color with the movement of the sun. Rows of tall seats faced a single platform at the center. The council of voices had gathered. These were not simple rulers. They were ancient minds shaped by law and battle. Some wore armor from old wars. Some held staffs carved with the names of fallen kings. All of them watched with stone stillness. At the center stood Princess Lyra. She wore no crown today, no heavy robes. Only a cloak of deep gray with the symbol of unity drawn in quiet silver on her chest. Her hands rested at her sides. Her face held no fear. To her right stood Tom. No guards, no suit, no weapons. Just him in a plain jacket with dust still on his boots from walking through the city streets. He had refused transport. He wanted to feel the ground with each step. A man should walk into truth, not fly above it. The first voice of the council called the room to order. The sound of the ancient gong rang across the walls like thunder swallowed by water. The floor trembled. This was not a simple hearing. This was a trial of belief. The future of two worlds stood on the edge of a single answer. Would a human be allowed to join the royal line of Velari? Could such a bond be accepted without breaking the laws written in flame? The voices began to speak one by one. Some spoke with fire. They warned that this union was not a symbol of peace, but a storm in disguise. They said it would weaken the empire. That humans were not made to understand Velari blood. That emotion could not carry the weight of the crown. Others spoke with calm. They said change had always come with fear. That many of the old laws were born from war, not wisdom. That if the princess had found strength in a human, then perhaps the strength came from something true. Lyra listened to them all. Her eyes did not shift. Her breath did not quicken. Then her turn came. She stepped forward with steady boots and raised her voice. She spoke not with anger but with clarity. She said that peace built only on fear was not peace but silence. She said that the old ways had brought strength but also distance. She said the time had come to choose connection over control. She told them how Tom had walked through fire not for reward, but because it was right. How he had spoken without demand. How he had listened with care. How he had not come to change her, but to walk beside her. She said no bond was perfect, but no bond ever was. What mattered was the choice to stand together, even when storms came. She ended with a promise that if this union failed, she would bear the cost with her name, not the council, not the people. Just her. Then she stepped back and let the silence settle. All eyes turned to Tom. He stepped forward and waited until the first voice nodded. He did not bow. He did not try to impress. He spoke like someone planting seeds. He told them he had grown up in a place where peace was a word people did not trust. He said he knew what it looked like when walls rose between people. He said this choice was not about pride or power. It was about building something no one had dared build before. He said unity did not need perfect people. It needed brave ones. He said he was ready to walk into a future where differences were not threats, but bridges. He ended with a quiet line. He said love was not weakness. It was the courage to care, even when others chose not to. The chamber held its breath. The vote began. Each council member pressed their mark into the ancient stone. The marks lit in gold or in red. The final stone glowed. The result came clear: a thin majority in favor. The union could move forward. Before joy could spread, a sharp sound broke through the hall. Doors burst open. Smoke rolled in from the rising clouds. Came dark figures. Keepers had made their move. Lyra reached for Tom, but the crowd split them apart. Guards tried to block the attackers, but were pushed back by shock pulses and flashwavazone of the keepers grabbed the princess and pulled her toward the exit. A transport waited outside, fast, shielded, ready to vanish. Tom fought his way through panic and flame. He saw her taken. He ran. He did not stop. He reached the gates as the ship lifted. He jumped and grabbed the edge. The ship rose with him hanging on inside the vessel. Lyra broke free from the grip of the guard. She fought like she had been trained. Swift, sharp, ruthless. Her elbow broke bone. Her knee cracked armor. She turned and saw Tom climbing through the back hatch with bleeding fingers and dirt across his face. Grabbed his hand and pulled him in together. They fought through the narrow space. Not prince and princess. Not diplomat and warrior, just two people refusing to let go. They reached the control deck. Lyra struck the pilot. Tom turned the ship around. They flew straight back to the palace. The council watched from the landing zone. The ship touched down. The door opened. They walked out together, covered in bruises and truth, not as prisoners, but as equals. The crowd fell silent. No one questioned their right to stand side by side anymore. Vows under two suns, the twin suns rose slowly over the high skies of Valari Prime. Their golden light passed through the tallest spires and painted the entire capital in soft fire. Wind flowed through the banners that lined the Grand Sky Plaza. Crowds had filled every corner of the city. People of both worlds, humans and Valari, stood side by side. Their eyes watched the great platform where history waited to speak. Tom stood quietly behind the chamber doors, his heart steady but full. His jacket was different today. A blend of human fabric and royal Valari threads stitched by hands from both planets. Across the chest lay a symbol made of two stars encircled by flame. It was not a symbol of power. It was a symbol of promise. Beside him stood 3 human officers and 1 Valari guard. All of them silent. All of them watching with a kind of pride that did not need words. Inside another chamber, Princess Lyra prepared for the last step of a path she never imagined. She had set down her crown for this day. Her armor was gone. In its place she wore a ceremonial robe crafted from stardust silk and crystal fiber. Light moved across it like living water. Her hair was tied back with a single ring of silver drawn from the same stone Tom had once carried from Earth's soil. She stood alone for a moment at the center of the chamber. Mirrors surrounded her, but she did not look at her reflection. She looked ahead, her breath slow, her heart steady. This was no longer a political answer. This was not about law or alliance or treaty. This was a choice. She remembered the voice of her mother saying true strength lives in the will to change. Outside the bells rang once. A deep sound that spread across the sky. It was time. The chamber doors opened from both sides. Tom walked toward the platform from the left. Lyra walked from the right. The wind lifted the corners of their robes. The sunlight fell across their faces, no words spoken. None needed. At the center of the platform stood the Empress herself. Her expression unreadable, but her presence calm as a mountain that had seen many storms. Behind her stood the first voice of the council and a human representative sent from Earth's command. Together they represented the binding of 2 paths. Lyra and Tom stopped before the Empress. Eyes met. The crowd held its breath. The Empress raised her hand. The sky seemed to still. She spoke not as a ruler but as a witness. She said this was a union built not on order but on will. That such bonds held more power than fleets. She asked them each to speak with truth. Lyra stepped forward. She said she had walked in silence for most of her life. That duty had been her shield and strength, her weapon. She had never planned to share her path. Then came a man who asked nothing except to stand beside her. She said she had seen fire in him. Not the kind that burns, but the kind that warms. She turned to him with eyes that had never shown such light. She said she would walk with him from this day forward through storm or peace without doubt. Then it was Tom's turn. He stepped forward with his hands open. No scroll, no script, just his voice. He said he had stood in war and peace and loss and wonder. That nothing he had seen had moved him more than this moment. He said love was not a sudden flame, but a steady light that chose to stay even when darkness grew loud. He looked at her and said he chose her not as a symbol, but as a soul. That his strength would be hers, and hers as the Empress lowered her hand. The first voice spoke the ancient phrase that marked the unity of 2 paths, not just between people. Between entire worlds. The crowd erupted in light and song across the galaxy. Messages spread faster than light. One after another, screens lit up showing the image of the human and the princess standing hand in hand before the stars. News reports called it the dawn of a new age. Children on distant colonies drew pictures of the scene and laughed with joy. Soldiers lowered weapons. Walls trembled. The keepers who had tried to stop it vanished from their hiding, their power broken by something they could never touch. Hope. Later that night, under the soft glow of moons, Lyra and Tom stood alone on the highest balcony of the palace. Below, the city shimmered with lights. Music floated upward, carried by gentle wind. Tom leaned on the railing, his eyes looking toward the edge of the horizon where stars waited to be named. Lyra stood beside him, silent but at peace. She looked at him and whispered a question, not out of disbelief, but out of memory. "You are still serious about marrying me?" Tom turned to her with a smile born not of charm, but of truth. More than ever, they stood together, watching the future come closer with every breath. And somewhere deep in the stars, something shifted, not in silence, not in battle, but in the joining of two hearts that dared to believe the end